Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Great to have you with us on the program today. Website, of course, thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest on today's show is Dr. Roberta Silfen. She's been a student, teacher, counselor, educational administrator, a graduate student in Cambridge, England, Hawaii, where she received her master's degree in education, Alabama, receiving a master's in counseling, and Texas, where Dr. Silfen obtained master's and doctorate degrees in administration and management. A Fulbright scholar, she's traveled extensively. She's the author of Southern Exposé, the story of her early teaching days in the early 1970s in the Deep South, a white teacher teaching in an all-black elementary school. And Dr. Roberta Silfen with us on This Week in America. Dr. Silfen, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us on the show.
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here.
It is a fascinating book, and I know this is a book that you spent a lot of time thinking about, whether you should write the book or not. Why did you decide to write the book? And it's sort of interesting, I guess some of your students at university actually encouraged you to go ahead and write this. Why did you feel the time was right now to write the book?
Well, I never wrote it when I finished teaching in the elementary schools because I thought, well, at the time I would never get another job teaching in a public school, because it's really an indictment of a public school system.
Well, yes, you lay it all out there, and I can understand that. So there was this trepidation that if I do this, I probably am not going to be able to continue doing this. Let's talk a little bit about that time frame. It's the early 1970s. For some of us, even at my age, it doesn't seem that long ago, and it's hard to believe things were as segregated as they were at that time. Talk about when you went to Montgomery, Alabama. The layout of the community really put you in this position that you were teaching at the all-black elementary school.
Yes, well, when I went to look for a job, actually, when I got there, I saw a number of signs in front of houses that said for sale, and I was surprised. And a friend of mine there who happened to be in the real estate business told me that every time they designate a neighborhood as being going to a black school, all the people there moved. In fact, there was one neighborhood that was brand new that all black people lived in that neighborhood too. And I asked, how did that happen? And they told me that they built that neighborhood for white people, but the white people wouldn't move when it was zoned for the black school. So the black people moved in, and of course they benefited from that because they lived in nice new homes. But that's how the schools were set up in those days. They were not segregated per se, but they were segregated because only black people went there and white people would not go there. They moved from those zones.
Before we talk about the experience there at the 6th grade at Carver Elementary School in Montgomery, let's go back to Hawaii. This is where you did your student teaching. You did practice teaching there. That's where you got the fundamentals of teaching. Talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move it to Montgomery and your experiences there. I understand when you were in Hawaii, it basically was practice time. You were turned loose by yourself on a classroom, and you really learned sort of trial and error how to go about teaching the right way.
I did. Well, I went to school at the University of Hawaii. That's where I got my education degree. And then I practiced taught in a school, and in Hawaii you do it for a full semester. And you have a practice teacher there, but in other words, from the first day, the class becomes yours. And if you do your own lesson plans. Every day you meet with the teacher and you go over what you tell the teacher what you did, and they give you some advice. And if you make a mistake, all the teacher said to me, I had trouble one day and my class was going downhill and hitting rock bottom. And she said to me, what are you going to do about it? I had to come up with my own solution. And I went home and I came up with my own solution, and from that day it changed. And I had a marvelous teaching experience there. And the classes had 40 students in them, which was not a problem. I know today they think if they have more than 20 that it's terrible. And then I got a job teaching in one of the schools. It was 6th grade, and I taught there for 2 years. And after 2 years, I left. The school, except for a beginning teacher, was wonderful because they had a beginning teacher supervisor who would meet with you every day and ask you how things were going, would come into the classroom and observe you, and you'd meet with her at the end of every day, and you had all the support you needed, and everything was positive with a smile on her face. So those were very good. There was very good, substantial background that I got in teaching, and I felt that I had learned more in Hawaii than most other teachers learn in other places.
You're listening to This Week in America. Dr. Roberta Silfen is with us on today's program. We're talking about her new book, Southern Exposé. Let's go ahead to Montgomery. Well, you actually left Hawaii and ended up in Montgomery, and your husband, an Air Force officer, so being transient was something that was part of your life, wasn't it?
That's right. It was part of my children's life also, because I had two young sons, and we always enjoyed going to new places. And I found out that moving for children is dependent upon the parents' attitude. So my children were always excited to go to new places.
And you go to Montgomery, Alabama, and you apply for a teaching job, and you find out that you will, and knew that you were going to be teaching at what ends up being an all-black school. Talk about that experience. Talk about how you were treated by the students. In the book Southern Exposé, you do an excellent job of outlining the students and how you adapted to them, they adapted to you. Talk about how you were greeted, like that first day of school when you go to sixth grade at Carver Elementary School. What was that experience like?
Well, first they try and size you up.
Oh, yes.
And of course, and since they were all black and I was white, I don't know if I was the first white teacher they ever had. But I had little problems with discipline, and they didn't want to listen to me, and they didn't want to do any work. And when I'd give them assignments, they never completed them. So I decided I had to do something about that. And so I started putting games in the back of the room. And I told the students when they finished their assignment, they could go play a game in the back of the room. After about a week or so, one of them finally finished. And I said to him, okay, now you can go in the back of the room and play a game. He said to me, really? Because he didn't believe me. I said, yes. After that, the students used to complete their assignments. I made them longer and longer. They completed their assignments, and they went back in the room and played. So they were learning at the same time.
They talked about discipline problems. Did you have discipline problems when you took over the classroom?
At the beginning, I did. And a couple of the black teachers told me, I'm very strict with them. And I tell them I tell the parents when they come and complain, if they go to the Board of Education, when they come out, you're going to need a dustpan and a broom to pick up the pieces. And she said they never complained to me. Another teacher said, she bangs their head against the chalkboard, and then they never complain. So the couple of new white teachers and I had a meeting with the principal, and we told her what those teachers had said. And she said, that's not true. She said, you look in the mirror and say the most terrible things and look at the look on your face, and that's the look you give to the children. But I never had to do that because I always believed them, and I always trusted them and respected them. And in return, they trusted me and respected me, and we never had a problem.
It's interesting when you found out that you could actually wear pants into the classroom rather than a dress. That actually helped the discipline problem, didn't it? I guess there's something about respect when you're actually wearing pants in the front of the class.
I guess that's true. I found it did make a difference, so after that I wore pants every day. When I first came there, it was not allowed. During the time that I was there, they changed the rulings.
And it's interesting because you're there, and it's not all that long when the kids really enjoy having you. They're learning, and they're actually asking, you have some time on the weekend, let's get together and do this again on the weekend. They wanted to make the school into 6 days a week, didn't they?
Yes, they did. First of all, after I started letting them play games, they had told me they liked to listen to music, and one brought a radio to school. And I said, if I will let you listen to the music if you promise to do your work. They said yes. And so we used to play music, and the children did their work. And at the end of the day, I used to dance with them at the end of the day. We had a good time. I really enjoyed them very much. They were wonderful children. They were very open and honest and trusting. And I was with them too. And I became part of the class. There were no leaders in the classroom. There were no followers in the classroom. It was just a group of unique individuals, and they accepted me as one of them.
Dr. Roberta Silfen is our guest on This Week in America. Her book is Southern Exposé. It's available all across the country. You go to Amazon, you go to Book Venture, and you can get information on the book. You can only find directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. It's interesting. You would like to think that everyone had equal access to education at that time. But that really wasn't the case, was it? You really were at sort of a disadvantage. For example, with school books, you had no library. You had textbooks that were hand-me-downs. It was sort of difficult, wasn't it, at that time?
Yes, but this was a learning experience for me. I had no idea. They used to send a bookmobile to the school, and I'd send a child down to pick out books. The principal would say, the bookmobile is here. She said, send two children down. The children would come up with these old books that were not even for children. So I decided my children didn't know how to pick books. The next time the bookmobile came, I would go down because I had two children in another school, and they used to come home with delightful books from the bookmobile. The next time the principal said, the bookmobile is here, I went down. And I saw these old torn books, and they were not children's books. And there was an old man who was the driver of the mobile. Maybe he was a librarian also. And I said to him, these are not books for children. And he said, these children can't read anyway. I said, they most certainly can. And I stormed out. And then I wrote a letter to the Board of Education complaining about him and the books. We never had another bookmobile. And then the principal said to me, we're not going to have any books. I went down to the main public library, and I made arrangements for each teacher to come down once a month. They could check out 30 books and bring them back to the school. And every 30 days we would change them, and we had our own library.
It's interesting. You created your own library.
Right.
Field trips, something else that these students were at a disadvantage because with field trips, they needed to have some funds to be able to get the transportation, that type of thing. Not able to do that. And you were able to solve that problem as well using the police department.
Yes, well, the symphony was free for children to go, but
Yes.
we had no transportation. And so somebody told me they thought the police department would do that. So I called the police department, and they said, yes, they would provide us with a bus. I had to tell them how many children and when. Before we left, I admit I had to talk with the students. And I told them, we're going to the symphony tomorrow. I want you to dress well. And a lot of people here think that black children do not know how to behave. So I want you to be on your best behavior. And they said, okay. Next day we got on the bus, we went to the symphony. They walked very orderly. They sat in their seats quietly. They listened to the music. They clapped appropriately. And when it was over, we got up and we left, and they went back on the bus. They were so well behaved, better than any of the other students there in the school. And of course, I told the children when we got back, I told them they were marvelous and they just beamed. And after that, we used to go to every symphony, and the police always provided the bus for the transportation, and the children were always better behaved than any other students at the symphony.
And with textbooks, it's interesting because when you thought you were going to get new textbooks, they actually were just newer textbooks from the white schools. Their textbooks had been replaced. Their old textbooks you got. And you talk about one of the Nova students that had an interesting take on all of that.
Yes, I have a Nova student now who, after the book was published, I sent her a copy. And she sent me an email. She said, I remember those days. She said, because I was given a book that had no cover and it had no back and it had torn pages inside. So she had books that were even worse than the ones my students got.
The book we're talking about is Southern Expose. Our guest on the program is Dr. Roberta Silfen. She's talking about the time she spent a white teacher in an all-black school in Montgomery, Alabama. Do children see racial differences? And you talk about that in the book, and the question that's asked of you during class, what color is Jesus? How did you handle situations like that?
Well, when I used to have class discussions groups, I used to sit in one of the chairs, the student chairs with them, and we would talk. And some boy came in, and he looked around the room, and he left, another student. And I found out from that teacher that he came to speak to the teacher in my classroom, and he went back and told her the teacher isn't in that room. He didn't even see a difference. And one day in one of the books that we were reading, we got into a discussion about Jesus. And they said to me, what color is he? I said, I don't know. So I said, ask the principal to please come up here. She was black. And she came up, and I said, the students have this question, what color is Jesus? Can you answer them? And she thought for a minute, and she said, no, I can't answer that question either. So she left, and at a later point, I told the children, I think that artists paint pictures of people that reflect them. So that a white artist probably paints Jesus as white, and a black artist probably paints Jesus as black.
One of the aspects you touch on is the importance you place on the teacher-learner relationship. Talk a little bit about that, because it was really your philosophy going into the classroom, and in a very short period of time, you were able to win over the students, and it was a productive experience for both you and the students. Talk about that relationship.
Okay, first of all, I don't believe that you can teach children all you want, but if they don't want to learn, they're not going to learn from you. And I started off with teaching black. I started teaching black history. One of the black teachers told me that none of them can teach it, and these children don't know it. So I had to educate myself, and I educated myself on the early African societies, and I started from the very beginning with the children. And then we got to the point where of the sit-ins in the South, when black people wouldn't be served at soda fountains and things like that. And I explained the sit-ins to them. Well, our principal used to say, I say the children learn when they can apply. You can tell when they apply their learning, you know they've learned something. Well, the principal in the school used to sell juice every day in the afternoons to the children, and the children always bought the juice. They paid for it. And one day, the principal had a ruling that they also used to serve for lunch nuts and fruits and things like that, and the children used to save those cups to have with their juice. Well, I think the principal had other things she wanted to sell to the children, so she made a ruling that they could not save their nuts and fruits for juice time. They had to finish it at lunch. So when the children heard that, they said, "We're having a sit-in. We're not buying her juice." Now, I never said anything. I just let them, I didn't say yes and I didn't say no. I just let it ride. And the next time somebody came up for them to buy juice and to give their money, they just said, "We're not buying juice." And this went on for about 2 weeks. And finally, the principal came into the room and said to them, "How come you children are not buying my juice?" And one of them just stood up and told her, "You are not letting us eat our nuts and our fruit, so we are not buying your juice." So a little while later, she rescinded the ruling, and then they started buying the juice again. At another time, the children used to go down to the cafeteria for lunch every day. I never bought lunch. My whole teaching career, I always brought my lunch with me. And they get online, and they come back with, say, if they serve spare ribs, they get one rib with no meat on it, just a knob of fat on the end. And I felt this was not enough for the children. So I used to send them back for a second time on the line. Now, the teachers got big portions, but the students got almost no protein whatsoever. And the woman who was on the lunch line never complained because she agreed with me. She said, "I know what you're doing because I know they need more food." But one day they served chicken, and one of the children in the class said, "Oh, that means we're going to have chicken again tonight." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, because the people take the food home from the cafeteria and they sell it in the neighborhood." I said, "Oh." The next day I came to school with my camera, and as I went to one of the windows that you could watch the parking lot, and I saw the people leaving the cafeteria, the workers, with these big trays of food on top of them. It was chicken piled high, it wasn't even covered. I said, "Oh." So I took pictures. I was called down to the principal's office, and she said to me, "What are you going to do with those pictures?" It's amazing how she knew everything that was going on.
Yes.
I said, I hadn't decided what I was going to do with the pictures. We had our own PE. We took care of it ourselves. So the next day at physical education, I took all my children outside before the cafeteria workers left. And they were playing ball. And all of a sudden, they saw the cafeteria workers walk out to go to their cars. And one of them yelled, "That's our food." And they all ran after them. And of course, I didn't say anything, but the cafeteria workers ran back in the building.
Just one of the many great stories in the book, Southern Expose. Our guest on the program, rapidly running out of time, is Dr. Roberta Silfen. That's Silfen. The book's available all across the country. It's an excellent read about what life was like in the early 1970s. And you say this, and I can tell in listening to your voice now, it's almost like this was yesterday when you had these experiences. You call them some of the most satisfying and enjoyable experiences of your career. In fact, I understand what at the end of the second or third year there, they said, "Okay, basically, congratulations, you can now move on to a white school." And you said, "No, thank you."
I said I liked it there, and I wanted to say that I loved those children. They were wonderful. And it was such a pleasure to see them grow and become educated and wanting to learn, because I made it fun for them. At the beginning, I used to have to make everything into a game for them to learn, but they learned. In fact, when I got there, I couldn't understand their speech because they dropped the endings of every word. And I had one boy who used to translate for me. Well, their speech changed while I was there because they started to emulate mine. I even had somebody come from the district office and poked her head in the room, and she said, "My goodness, they're even using dictionaries." These children learned and they became I know one of the girls got a scholarship and went on to college, and she got a tennis scholarship because I started them playing tennis on the blacktop out there.
And if I recall, you didn't have any nets, you just had...
I went to a couple of garage sales, and I bought some tennis rackets and some balls, and we played without nets, but they learned.
That's amazing. And what's it like when you look back on that part of your career? How rewarding is that? Because you went in with nothing and you gave these kids hope. You gave them opportunity. You gave them an opportunity to thrive in a classroom that really wasn't designed for them to thrive in.
Well, it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I was so successful that it was the most successful years of my life.
And you've had a lot of success in your life, starting with the Fulbright Scholarship and teaching and traveling all around the world. The book is Southern Exposé by Dr. Roberta Silfen. That's Silfen. The book's available all across the country. Dr. Silfen, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I really enjoyed reading the book. What a career and what an influence you had on a number of children back in that time frame. Thank you for sharing the stories with us on the program today.
You're welcome, and thank you. I've enjoyed talking about it.
It was great having you with us on the program. And the book, once again, is Southern Exposé by Dr. Roberta Silfen. You can find information, of course, available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us.